morning, everyone. Today is July 18th, 2024, and welcome to the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project founded by Natalie Armstrong Motan. Every Thursday morning, Jean Lawler and I are delighted to co-host another exciting presentation for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and everyone who negotiates. As you probably know, there's no charge for these great presentations. Rather, we ask you to contribute what you can to a food bank if you like what you see. And one of my favorite parts of the program every week is when we announce the running total of just how much our generous audiences have contributed in honor of our great speakers since we began the series in 2020. Jean Lawler, would you please do the honors?
With that kind of an introduction, right? Wow, we are getting so close to 600,000, everyone, and that is well more than 6 million meals served. So donations of which we have been told, and I always put that asterisk there because you know people don't always tell you what they've donated. The donations of which we've been told as of today, $595,275.42, and that's to food banks around the world. And I will tell you, I just returned from 2 weeks in Ireland. It was fantastic. But there I was in Portrush, Northern Ireland, and they had a big sign up about their local food bank. And I, of course, thought it will work for food. So again, this is a global exercise. And thank you so much for everything that you do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jean. And I know that it's very likely that Joana Matos will go down in history as the speaker who put the Will Work for Food project over $600,000. Boy, that's going to do you very well at pub trivia wherever you live around the world. Speaking of Joana Matos, we're about to have a deep dive into negotiating in the age of AI, where we will explore how artificial intelligence is transforming the landscape of negotiation. Discover how AI tools can enhance decision-making, optimize strategies, and improve outcomes in your negotiations. We will delve into the ethical considerations and challenges posed by AI and discuss practical ways to integrate AI technologies while maintaining the human touch. Whether you're a seasoned negotiator or new to the field, this session will provide valuable insights and actionable takeaways for leveraging AI in your negotiation processes. And Joana Matos of Deutsche Bank we could not have a better presenter. Joana has conducted training on topics such as negotiation, gender and culture in negotiations, conflict management, and emotional intelligence, and has wide international experience. Through her work at Rational Games, Inc., she has had the opportunity to teach at several prestigious companies and government institutions, such as the German Foreign Ministry, the BBC, Mercator College, University of Zurich, Zing, and EU International Communication Union, to name a few. Besides mediation and advanced negotiations training from the Harvard Program on Negotiations, she holds an MBA from Reykjavik University, a master's in humanitarian action and conflict from Uppsala University, as well as a diploma in protocol and diplomacy from the International School of Diplomacy of Brussels. Furthermore, she has specialized in humanitarian negotiations at the Klingendal Institute of International Relations of the Netherlands, and she is a PhD candidate at the Twente University in negotiations. She is a Portuguese and Icelandic citizen and is fluent in Portuguese, Spanish, English, and Icelandic. So Joana Matos of Deutsche Bank and the world, please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they're in a position to do so. And then on with this fantastic presentation. The floor is yours.
Wow, Jeff, that was quite an introduction. Thank you for that. Very flattering. And I can see I promised a lot, so I'll try to deliver as much as possible on the topic, Regarding the food bank, I just relocated to Frankfurt, Germany, only a couple of months ago. So I looked up the biggest food bank here, and I suggested that one. And it's called Tafel in Germany, and they've done a lot of good things and helped a lot of people. I myself volunteer for cooking meals through the Deutsche Bank. We do that too, and every week we're cooking about 150 to 300 meals for homeless people and people with addictions. So we also do that, but it's an internal project. So I find what you're doing really, really interesting, and I was extremely flattered to be able to contribute to it. That being said, if it's too difficult to donate to this particular bank, if you have to make an international transfer or whatever, I'm happy if you just donate to whoever needs, really. I think that's the main goal. So yeah. So today I was going to talk to you about negotiation in the age of AI. I think it's a topic everyone seems to be talking about. And many might be a little bit curious, what is it really we can do and negotiations with all of this? So Jeff, I thought I would start with a part presentation where I'll go through some case studies and some ideas. And then whatever time is left, we could have a discussion, take in questions, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. This is such a topic, and I'll do my very, very best to answer everything. And also, before we start, I work as a deal expert at Deutsche Bank in the Office for Negotiation. For this particular presentation, I'm going to be talking not on behalf of the bank, but on behalf of myself as a researcher. I'm doing my PhD in negotiation and AI, so this is what I found out and my opinions about this topic. So just a disclaimer before I share my screen. Perfect. I've got some powers now. So, all right. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Perfect.
All right. So no need to introduce the topic again. Jeff did a pretty good job at introducing it. So what I want to talk to you for the next hour or so is really what's the role of AI in negotiations, right? So AI is revolutionizing pretty much everything across the board, and it's also revolutionizing how we do and run our negotiations. And we get a lot of data, we have to adjust our strategies. There's a lot of different things we're doing on a negotiation that can be done by an AI, or at least supported. But before I go into a lot of depth onto these things, I think first is important to clarify a little bit of what type of AIs are there and their different roles, so we can understand this landscape a little bit better before we go into the specifics. So I'll give you just a very quick crash course in the types of AIs and what kind of AI does what. So basically we have three types of AIs. We have narrow AI, general AI, and super intelligent AI. So some people might already know these things, but basically narrow AI is what we call artificial narrow intelligence, and they're designed for specific tasks like face recognition or voice assistance, but it lacks general intelligence. Then we have general AI, which is still not really existing. We're working on it. Artificial general intelligence would be an intelligence that is equivalent to humans, like totally equivalent, and could act as humans across all our tasks. And then we have the super intelligent AI, which was, when we get there, that's where all these doomsday movies come from, where the AI takes over the planet and is much smarter than us. But as you can see, just wanted to show you this to see that we're kind of two AIs behind the whole world domination and chaos and all of that. So we're safe. But so basically we are in the narrow AI, and in narrow AI, you also have two types of AIs. You have the traditional AI, which is the one that we didn't even realize really that was so much AI. You have Netflix suggesting you what to watch. You have Siri not so effectively responding to all your questions. I feel like Siri somehow stopped in time. Anything you ask is like, here's what I found on the web. You're like, well, I can Google, just tell me the answer. But in the beginning, Siri was quite the thing when it came out. Then you have self-driving cars like Tesla and Google cars. And even if you think about your email, the way that Gmail, for example, is flocking your spam mail, that's a traditional narrow AI that is learned to recognize what kind of signals create spam mail. And also the bots, when you go on a website and you need help and you're forced to chat with a bot, which I don't know about you, but it often makes me very frustrated. I just keep writing, speak to a human, please. So all these things fall into the traditional AI. Then you have the new boom in generative AI. And that's the things that we're seeing in this last couple of years that everyone is very excited about, like ChatGPT, like Copilot. And you have DALL-E making amazing art that we thought AI could not be creative, but somehow is doing pretty good. And also AIs to create music and videos. You have a little bit of a lot of different things you can do now with AI really fast and really effectively. Right in the middle, I put Google Translate, because Google Translate started as a traditional AI, but is actually now a generative AI. It's moving towards that sector because now it actually reads your sentences and can make more sense of the nuances of the language. So you have words that mean a lot of different things. And now they've gotten better and better at understanding the nuances of our language, which didn't used to be very good. And depending on the language, I remember the first Google Translate for Icelandic, it was just, sometimes we use it just to laugh a little bit because it was too funny, the things it came up with. It was, but now it's incredibly good. It's really, really good. So it's learning and it's evolving and it's quite impressive. So now that you had a little bit of a crash course on these types of AIs, I won't bore you with all the details. We go down to business. So why are we talking about this? I guess this is a topic that's been highly talked about. And if you look in the news, it's constantly something coming up, either of some startup that has been saving Walmart millions of dollars on negotiating with bots, or whether it's the discussion, should you do it or should you not? And can this be done? Is it as efficient? So there's a lot of talk about the topic online. And if we look at the landscape, this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the AIs that are there for negotiations. But these are some of the ones that I'm most familiar with. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about the ones that I know and can tell you more about it. So if we start by looking at generative AI tools. Generative AI tools, I think most of you probably already played a little bit with ChatGPT or Bard or Copilot. A lot of companies have been integrating Copilot in their Windows package that you can use Copilot when you're working, and people are experimenting with it. Claude is also popular. I haven't used it a lot myself. I'm particularly a fan of ChatGPT. I feel like is the one that gives me the most somehow reliable answers and more in-depth. And so it's my preferred tool. At work, we use Copilot, so I have to use Copilot. So, but in which ways can this sort of generative AI tools, large language models, can they help us in our negotiations? Well, there are many ways. You can ask for several assistants, but I thought I would share with you a case study that I read in the book of a friend of mine, Kjeld Jensen. His new book, Negotiation Essentials, actually details a study that he did with the World Commerce and Contracting. And he did an experiment, and I'll share it with you because I think you'll find it interesting. I think an experiment is worth 1,000 words, and you'll probably more likely to remember it. They set up a test with 3 different negotiation setups. So the first one was just a regular one, human versus human, me negotiating with you, normal thing. The second one was human versus human with the assistant of ChatGPT. And Kelp chose ChatGPT, but it could have been any of the other large language models that I mentioned before. And the third one was human assisted with ChatGPT and human with the assistance of ChatGPT. Now, I'm curious, what do you think? Maybe you can write it in the chat before I actually tell you. Which one do you think had the best results? Human versus a human with some help, or human with some help versus a human with some help? What do you think? And Natalie, they can write on the chat, right? I guess so. Okay, Natalie thinks it's number 2, number 1. Couple of more, so we have a sample. So we can number 2, number 2, number 2. All right. Anyone else wants to vote? Miro says number 3, and Jeff says number 3. Mostly number 2s and 1 number 1. All right. Thank you. So here's what happened. In the first scenario, human versus human, and this was just a role play that they were negotiating. The two groups negotiated without AI assistant. They often went off topic. They failed to reach an agreement within the time frame due to lack of openness and limited data sharing. So they were not sharing enough, and it didn't go very well. Now let's look. So scenario number 1 doesn't seem very promising. Now let's look at scenario number 2. In the second scenario, one group used ChatGPT, but not the other one. And the negotiation was more structured and with clearer data and better calculations. And they reached an agreement just before the time limit. So they barely made it, but they made it. They reached an agreement. Now on the third one, where we have both sides with assistant for ChatGPT, the negotiation concluded faster, and it was win-win, was beneficial for both sides, and finished well before the deadline. So actually on the third case, when both parties had the support of an AI helping them analyze the offers they were getting, helping them make sense of everything, they actually reached an agreement faster, and they had a win-win agreement that both parties were happy with. Now, this is quite interesting because we oftentimes think that, we will do it best without any assistant of AI, but actually we can get quite emotional, as we all know, on a negotiation. And we might start talking more and listening less, not asking the right questions. So if you use tools like this, and I'm going to tell you a couple of ways you can use ChatGPT in your negotiations. So again, according to Keldon and his book, he's talking about several areas where you can use ChatGPT or similar to improve your negotiations. One of them is preparation. So AI can assist you in researching and setting clear objectives. It can help you brainstorm alternatives and understand the subject better that you're negotiating about. There's also on the list that we saw very briefly in the beginning, there was one AI that is called Crystal Knows. It's called Crystal. And I don't know if you heard of Crystal, but Crystal, basically what Crystal does, it produces a profile of the person you're talking with. So let's say, oh, you're going to negotiate with Joana Matos. Who is this girl? What is, what kind of person is she? Is she friendly? Does she like facts or something? So Crystal pretty much crawls the whole internet and finds anything I ever published, any comment, anything I put on LinkedIn, and creates a sort of a personality profile for me. And it will tell you, look, with Joana, you have to be a little funny, have it not too formal. She doesn't like too structured, so you can be a little bit freestyler, and it will give you some things. And it will give you also some energizers. Look, for Joanna, energizers can be a little bit of small talk or this or that. And then you have drainers. For Joanna, drainers might be, don't show too many graphs, or don't get lost into a lot of details or something like that. I'm not saying that's me, okay? I'm not going to reveal my profile. But it's a really, really interesting tool because it helps you connect with the other party. Because in the end of the day, negotiations is building trust, creating a relationship with the other party so we can share information and find the better deal, find the win-win. If you know a little bit about the personality of the other person, it makes it easier for you to try to connect with a person, and potentially avoid triggering the person with, for example, too much small talk if this is a person that likes to go straight to the topic, or whatever it is. So I encourage you to look at Crystal, and it's going to be on the slides. Then another thing you can do with ChatGPT, for example, is strategy development. So you can formulate different strategies. You can say, hey, this is situation X and X, and this is this type of a company. We're trying to negotiate this and this deal. What kind of strategy should I have? What kind of interests might my counterpart have? And it can even help you plan your communication. Now, during negotiations, you can have ChatGPT as your advisor on the side too, and keep a productive dialogue, helps you with your emotions. And I'll give you an example from my life. You know, I'm born in Portugal, so there's an emotional component to me, even though I'm well trained on communication, and generally I can keep my emotions quite well guarded. But when I moved to Germany, I had a situation with the mover that brought my furniture over, and he created a lot of damages. He broke some of my furniture, and I indicated to him that he had destroyed my daughter's new desk on her room, and that he had to cover the cost, which he was not very happy to do. In the end, he said, well, pay the invoice, we'll talk about it later. And I thought, you don't know, I'm a trained negotiator. Obviously, I'm not going to pay the invoice and talk about this later because you're never going to pay it. So I said, let's talk about the damage first, and then I'll pay you. I sent him the invoice for this table, and he sent me an email back that said the following. Dear Miss Matos, I had a look into this desk from your daughter, and I was very surprised to find out that the company you bought this desk from is producing their desks out of industrial waste, and the paint they use, it's very, very toxic. I cannot believe that you could be such a bad mother of buying something like this to your child. So it was my first week in Germany, right? Just deal with it. And then he offered me a really ridiculous settlement for it. I was about to leave the country for a week training, so I thought I'll deal with it when I come back. I just moved. I need to calm myself before I answer this guy and think about what I'm going to say. Never answer when you're upset immediately, right? Well, I'm teaching abroad, and I get another email from the guy, and the email said, Dear Miss Matos, since you did not pay the invoice and you did not reply to my email, I decided that you're not going to pay, and I am going to sue you. So if you do not pay today, you're going to have to come to court tomorrow. And it was, again, a very unfriendly one. As you can imagine, I was extremely upset. I was so upset. It was just too much. Moving with 2 kids, getting this guy threatening to sue me in a country I don't belong to, and I don't know the language, and I don't know anything. So I went to ChatGPT and I pasted his emails, and I asked ChatGPT to draft a polite, assertive reply with the objective of reaching a settlement with this guy without any litigation and blah, 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 blah. And you would be amazed at what ChatGPT wrote, because it really didn't, it was nothing close to what I wanted to tell this guy. But what happened is that I changed it a little bit. I used it. We managed to negotiate a settlement without any more escalations. And it really did help me, because at that moment, I was not being capable of really taking my emotions aside. I was too tired, too much going on. And having a tool like this really helps, because it doesn't have this emotion. ChatGPT doesn't care that the guy said I was a bad mother or tried to trigger any of my hot buttons. So it really can help you. And people are generally amazing in Germany, though. Don't take this as we do have some weird things here, cross-cultural adjustment that I had to take. And then, of course, after you finish negotiating with the person, the AI tools can help you analyze the outcomes and strategize for future negotiations. Because if you use AI tools a lot, you collect a lot of data, and they can create a history of how your negotiations with certain person or certain areas or certain fields have been going, and how that, how you can better adjust your strategy. So these are some of the few things you can do with ChatGPT, and online you can find lots of interesting prompts for ChatGPT, because of course, the message you put in has a lot to do with what you get out. So you really have to learn how to speak the language of ChatGPT to get good results. Now, there's a lot of other tools also in negotiation that you can use. Let's look at, for procurement, there's a couple of interesting ones. And one that I've seen demos from and seen how they work is, for example, MySupply. And MySupply does, basically, they can automate e-auctions for companies. And they also launched a bot. So basically, their system is going to see if your negotiation situation is more appropriate for a bot or is more appropriate for an automated e-auction, and will guide you to the process. And it's pretty easy to configure. You say what kind of negotiation it is and what kind of things you want to offer or not to the supplier, and what you expect from the supplier, what's kind of your goal. And then the bot will speak to your supplier and negotiate. And now they're integrating also large language models to make the conversation more dynamic, because the first bots that came out were very generic in the way that they had kind of some presets of answers. And sometimes that can become a little bit, I wouldn't say annoying for the supplier, but you want to go in a different direction. And if that has not been planned, it doesn't work. So that's why companies like MySupply are integrating large language models so that the model can react. Then another one that you have is Namu. And Namu is also doing automated negotiations, but everything they do is highly based on game theory. And the founders are game theory experts, and through this different, they have these algorithms that they don't share because it's their property, but the algorithm has lots and lots of data sets and analyzes them and decides what's the best strategy for your particular situation. So their AI is also going to recommend the optimum negotiation strategy for your situation. And they work with many big companies as well, like MySupply, and have showed pretty good savings. On their website, they say over 12% on one case study. So there is some savings to be had on this automation of procurement. And then you have Pactum. I think many of you might have heard of Pactum because they got a lot of media attention. Pactum landed a pretty good deal with Walmart, where they managed to test it really big time, and to show that on 68% of their negotiations, they had savings of on average 2%. These are good solutions for tail spend. If you're in procurement, everyone's always struggling with tail spend. So solutions like this can really help. Now, let's look into learning. I don't know if some of you, like myself, are negotiation trainers or teachers or something like that. Well, there's also something to be had in that field. If you're a negotiation trainer or a teacher, there's some fun things that you can do now with AI that didn't used to be available. So one thing I tried to do, in the bank, they offered us a training that was fully run by an AI avatar of some sorts. And it was funny because it was very realistic. If it wasn't for the hands, because just like we humans, they also don't know what to do with their hands. So this is where you spotted that they're like, what do we do with these things? So the hands were a little bit artificial, but I have to tell you, other than that, it was like I would be just an avatar talking to you. Very, it looks really like, oh, I see a little girl, so cute. Hi, yeah, and it was quite interesting because I was watching that training, and I called my husband and I said, look, you see how beautiful she is? This is not fair. She has no wrinkles. She doesn't look tired. She looks just wonderful. And my husband looked at my computer screen and he said, well, honey, maybe she doesn't have kids. And I'm like, that's not a person. That's an avatar. So that's how real she actually looked. She looked so real that my husband didn't realize that this was not even a real woman that was talking. So clearly she doesn't have kids. It's an avatar. But you get what I mean. It's really getting very good. And then you have other things like iDecision games. And iDecision games started as a platform to help negotiation professors, for example, to do the role plays. So instead of distributing papers in class, students would log into this platform and everyone would get their role. So you are the seller, I am the buyer. And then in the end, you could see some pretty good graphs of the distribution of the deals, who got the best deal, and how you compare to your colleagues and get some feedback from your colleagues. Now, what they did now is that they integrated AI. So you're actually negotiating with an AI. And what this allows you, first allows you to practice a lot and allows you to practice different personalities. So you can try a hardcore negotiator or a more soft, more inclusive, or whatever it is that the different personalities like you get in people. So this is me trying to negotiate a catalog simulation with some photographer that owned the picture. So I'm trying to tell him to, lower his price. First, he wanted $10 for each picture. That was way too high. So I'm kind of negotiating with him, and it's actually interesting to see how he replies, because it's very human wording, He says, flattery will get you far, Joanna. I'm intrigued. What kind of deal are we talking about for my masterpiece to grace your catalog? So it's very kind of like you're talking to a person. It doesn't seem robotic at all. And in the end of me trying to squeeze this guy or bot, I got a deal. I got him to agree to $1. So I think I did a good negotiation with him. And after you finish the negotiation, you go to the next screen and you actually get a pretty good feedback from the AI and how you did and in which points you could have done better. So it was good that you focused on other things other than price, but you could have asked more questions, or you could have gone a little bit deeper on this and this point. So you kind of have your own personal AI coach. And it's through feedback that we get better. And this AI can analyze everything you said, and really, without any hard feelings, telling you if you were too rude or too blunt, or if you were lacking in empathy, or if you didn't ask enough questions. You get everything on the feedback. And then you can see how you scored compared to other people. So it seems like I got one of the lowest prices. Obviously, I wouldn't show you. If I had done really bad, I would just skip it. But but because it went pretty well, I'm sharing it. And I used iDecision games when I was taking some trainings at MIT. They were one of the first collaborating with iDecision games to really try the AI out. And I found it really, really interesting, even from a professional's point of view, to have a place to practice. Because it's not I read a lot of books, but you really need to practice. It's like a new language. I can be reading about German. If I don't speak to anybody, I'm sure I'm not going to be very good at it. So if you want to try it yourself, you can take a print screen of this slide or a picture of it, and each of these QR codes will take you to a page on iDecision games. I do believe you have to register to try it, but you don't pay anything. It's just registration. And you can negotiate with Trump or with Barack Obama to split $2 with them. And you can do it with voice as well. So if you don't want to be writing, you can also speak. And it's really the voice of Barack Obama and the voice of Trump. And you can have a conversation and try to get them to give you as much as split of those $2. So keep this one, and I guess you'll share the presentation afterwards, right, Natalie? Yeah. So you try it at home. I think you will enjoy trying it out. It's quite a fun experience, and it really shows you how the AIs are already so good. Another thing, if you are curious to know more, there's a lot of courses going on that you can take for free or almost for free. There was an interesting one where you learn to create your own AI assistant. I'm doing it right now. So I find it quite interesting. It's for the humanitarian sector particularly, so it's more to find ways to get to peace. Seems like the world's been a little bit less peaceful than usual. But it still really helps you how to speak to large language models, how to speak to ChatGPT, to use it to your advantage. So you'll have that one. Now, of course, we talk about using AI for our negotiations, of using it to, and there's one more thing with AI that I forgot to tell you, and that's sentiment analysis. There are some AIs out there that while you are negotiating, they can be reading what's happening with the other person. Are they confused? Are they upset? Are they getting tired? And this sentiment analysis is something you can integrate to get live feedback of what's happening. So there's a lot of different things we can do right now, and a lot of tools we can use. But like everything else, we need to think about some ethical considerations to everything. Well, of course, there's lack of human judgment. Like I told you about this guy that was, this my first German encounter that was going to sue me and all that. One thing AI did great is that it didn't feel empathy or anything. It's just very logical. And that can be really good, but it can also be not so good, because as we all know, you cannot be only logical. So if an AI-driven negotiation, if there's no empathy or the nuanced judgment, this can lead to outcomes that might be legally correct, but ethically not so correct. And for instance, maybe an AI is pushing for the lowest possible price in a supplier negotiation and is ignoring that the supplier is struggling financially, and that this can put his, he might really need to take the deal, but that might put his company at greater risk. Another thing is power imbalance. Of course, if large companies are using very sophisticated AI tools, they may gain, of course, an unfair advantage over smaller suppliers that cannot afford those kind of technologies. And that again can lead to exploitation, and smaller suppliers have to be coerced into less favorable terms. Then we, of course, have the issues of data biases, and you might have heard already a little bit of talk about it. It has been talked about, but as we know, AI systems are only as good as the data that they are trained on. So it's like children, you train them a certain way and it comes certain something out, right? So if the historical data that we're using for the training contains biases, the AI is going to perpetuate those biases. So we have to be careful with that. So if some AI, if past negotiations have favored certain demographics over others, the AI may continue to favor those demographics moving forward. And then we also have something called algorithmic fairness. So it's again, we have to ensure fairness in AI, and that requires that we carefully consider how algorithms are designed and how are deployed. For example, in hiring. So if you use an AI in hiring negotiations, you might unintentionally be favoring candidates for a certain background if the training data again reflects historical hiring biases. And we saw that with Amazon, because Amazon developed an AI hiring tool that was later found to be biased against women, because it was trained on resumes submitted over a 10-year period, which was predominantly male. So the people that were training it didn't realize that this could happen, and they only found it later, and they had to, kind of fix that. And of course, and if a large retailer is using AI to negotiate with suppliers, and the AI constantly pushes for the lowest possible price, this can lead to dissatisfaction. So we also have to think about the relationship. So we always have to find sort of the balance that, yes, we can achieve savings. And I know all these companies that, at least that I presented to you, think about this too, how we can keep the relationship also intact. And we have to balance those two things, because no one likes to be exploited, right? That's not something. So of course we have some challenges, we have some opportunities. And another challenge we have to be careful overall with AI is that we don't outsource all our thinking to AI. Because I was having a discussion with a friend of mine. He's an expert in critical thinking in Iceland, and Thorstein. And he was talking about system one thinking, system two thinking. And if we constantly outsource our thinking to AI and we don't critically analyzing, there's a risk. There's a risk that we'll rely too much on AI and we'll stop thinking, because ultimately humans always try to save energy, and thinking uses a lot of energy. So if we can outsource that task, like we love the washing machine and the dishwasher, anything that can save our energy, right? But we should be mindful of the thinking. We can get ideas, but we should look into it critically. Does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Is this the strategy? I've asked often ChatGPT for advice, and I was not too happy with their advice. And I'm like, no, I don't think this is the best strategy. But it's nice to have some ideas. And then through those ideas, make up your own mind and critically look into the information you're getting. Because we're at risk now that, you know, back in the day, we would search for information online, you Google, you get 30 results or 40 or 1,000,000, and you maybe read the first 10 or so. So you have different points of view. Now with AI, you go there, you ask something, you get one answer. One. So that's what we have to be a little bit careful with, of not relying too much and still keep, not save too much energy here, save energy in other things, keep our thinking, keep our critical thinking alive, and have a little fun of it. Try it and try to see what we can learn from it. So this was my kind of intro to allow some time for some questions as well. So I'll stop sharing so I can see you. Let me see. Yeah. Right, there you are.
Joanna, thank you. This is fascinating and a great overview. Every time I hear an update on AI, there's always something new. It seems like every week things are changing. So let me ask you this. Let's say hypothetically you're kind of a baby boomer, middle-aged mediator, and you're sitting in, you know, let's say hypothetically Los Angeles, California, and you're getting ready for a mediation, and you say to yourself, Jeff, how could I use AI to help me prepare for this particular mediation? And let's say it's a trade secret case where you have the founder of a company and then you have some younger millennial employees think they're not getting treated fairly. They leave the company, open up their own office across the street. The founder claims that the family jewel trade secrets have been taken. The younger people who've left and formed their own company say that, no, we just took what is commonly known in the industry, what anybody in the industry would know about how to run this business. It's kind of a paradigm of a trade secret dispute. So what might I or some other mediator, not particularly at home with AI, do to prepare better for such a mediation?
That's a good question, Jeff. There's several things you can do. Well, one thing is if you use, for example, ChatGPT, you would have to anonymize everything. So you could still share the situation. You would just replace, well, not use, you would say company X, person A, or whatever, just to make sure it was fully anonymous and impossible to know exactly the company we're talking about. So what I would do, I would describe as good as possible the situation anonymously, and tell ChatGPT to act as. So it's always the best way to speak to ChatGPT is to tell them to act as a certain person. So I would say act as a extremely experienced and reputable mediator. You're facing this situation. These are the two parties. These are the two situations. And then you would ask whatever questions you usually ask yourself. So where might there be common ground? What kind of questions should I be asking the parties? How may I uncover the most information from them? And you would try to find ideas. What might be the arguments of each party? I guess they'll tell you in a mediation. If you give them airtime, they'll tell you everything why the other party is wrong. But kind of try to find ideas on how you could find ways to get them to meet. Obviously, you also have the legal aspect, which you can also ask ChatGPT legally, which party would have higher chances. They also can give you pretty good legal advice, not probably as good as lawyers. And I know there's at least one lawyer on the call because I've seen him and I know him. So not saying lawyers should be replaced by ChatGPT, but you can get some, you heard that, Miro? You're not replaceable. Yes. But and with ChatGPT, the good thing is best way to talk to it is to gradually ask more questions. So sometimes the mistake people do is ask too many questions at once. Tell me what do they have in common and not, what kind of strategies I should use, what should I not? Ask a lot of questions. You get fairly poor results like that. So ChatGPT works best in incremental things. So you ask a more generalized and you ask a little bit more and a little bit more, and you can gradually go deeper and deeper, because ChatGPT can also be a little bit lazy, funnily enough. I think it's because, again, it spends energy. So it's also programmed to not spend too much energy. As you'll see, sometimes it will give you a little bit short answers. You're like, come on, you can do better than that. And then you have to ask, please expand on that cheap answer you just gave me to save energy. And you get more. So it's like learning to communicate. But in a nutshell, Jeff, you should fit in the situation, anonymize it, and then ask the sort of questions you would ask yourself and get a second opinion, kind of a second opinion. And often you get new ideas that you might have not thought of, even though people think AI is not creative. If you think about it from a philosophical point of view, and I love philosophy, what is creativity, really? Are we coming up with new things? Oftentimes, we're putting together everything we've been exposed to during our lives in a new way. So large language models have been exposed to 1 billion things more than we have. So they can also put it together the same way as our brains connect different dots. So sometimes it's kind of, you go down in the definition of creativity, it's not always something totally new. It's just the way we connect information differently.
Fascinating. Now, Joanna, let's talk a little bit about your own personal experience with this. First of all, as a prelude, I think everybody would like to understand a little better what your day job is and what it means to be a deal negotiation consultant with Deutsche Bank, one of the largest financial institutions in the world. And then how you, and you can make it a composite or anonymize it, how have you personally used ChatGPT or any of the other AI tools in connection with significant negotiation in which Deutsche Bank was involved?
Thank you, Jeff. Well, let's start with what the job is about. So I'm a deal expert, which means that I do 3 things at the bank. One part of what I do alongside with my colleagues in the department is training of staff. So we kind of elevate the level of negotiations and kind of standardize it across the bank. So we teach across divisions our colleagues to become better negotiators. The second thing we do is deal advisory. So we come and advise our colleagues that are facing big negotiations. We help them from preparation to implementation to closing the deal. We kind of support them throughout, but as an invisible party. So you would be still sitting across someone else, but behind this person would be Joanna, kind of going over the details of the deal and helping prepare and what are we going to do, where's our goal, what we want to get out of this, like really going through the difficult questions and preparing and helping with the strategy. Now, the third thing we do is deal making, and that's when we actually sit at the table. So instead of just advising our colleagues, we'll be sitting together at the table and negotiating ourselves. So this is basically the three things that we do in the Office for Negotiation. In terms of AI, Jeff, so in the bank, at the bank, I cannot use it yet because of confidentiality issues. So we're not allowed to have ChatGPT on our computer. And we are now on some phases of trying to progress towards that. But as you can imagine, with our compliance and everything, this takes a lot of time to implement. So it's something that is ongoing and that we're going to test now. So I'm excited about it. So I've been using it mostly for negotiations outside of the bank or when I'm consulting or something like that. In that case, you can use, and I often use Crystal Knows to get profiles of the people that I'm going to negotiate with, to at least have an idea of what kind of communication style might be the most impactful with that particular person. So if you're very analytic, very straight to the point, I'll try to be less bubbly and less, less me, perhaps a little bit more contained, so that I can mirror sort of your style. Another thing I do is then anonymize and feed some of the details on the negotiation, try to brainstorm the levers. So a very, very important thing in negotiations is, instead of getting stuck on positions, trying to find more things. What else is there? So I'm negotiating with you, Jeff. We're talking about price, but what else is there that we can negotiate about? And actually, ChatGPT, for example, can be pretty good. And ChatGPT has one tab that is called the negotiator. I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen that, Jeff?
No.
So, no? Okay. So they have a particular, like, specific thing called the negotiator.
Do you want to share your screen? Do you want to share your screen?
I'll share my screen, and I'll show you. So let me just share my screen here, and I'll show you share here. So you see here the negotiator. I'll help you advocate for yourself, get better outcomes, become a great negotiator. Could you role play a salary negotiation with me? Prepare me for a negotiation for a car purchase. Walk me through figuring out my BATNA, my alternative. How can I imagine my emotions when negotiating? So you can message the negotiator, and it's programmed towards negotiation. So you can play a lot of things with it, and just ask whatever you want. And he will ask you some questions, you'll answer them, and he'll guide you through the process of negotiating that price down and whatever. Find the levers, find the other things you can ask for. And especially with cars, for example, you always get really stuck on the price, right? You're going to buy a car and you think the price is the main thing. And Tina is saying, just curious. What does Tina say? I've been integrating AI to my daily life. I interpret it. Okay, interesting. So she got a pretty, let me see the response she got. You used Copilot. I prefer ChatGPT than Copilot, even though I've noticed that because of ethical issues, there's topics and things that they've stopped getting involved in. So for example, when I was doing the Trump versus Barack Obama slide, I asked DALL-E to generate a picture of Trump and Barack Obama together. And they were not allowed to. The ChatGPT said, sorry, I cannot generate that picture. with famous people. So they are now starting to put the filters on the things you're asking, and they're refusing to ask certain things. But as I was saying with the car sale, you get stuck in price. But there are other things you could get. For example, when I bought my car here in Germany, I tried to think of other things, and I ended up getting free winter tires. And I also got storage for the winter tires over the summer months, and different things that were not initially in the deal. But do I want 4 tires in my living room in my new apartment in Germany? Not really. So small things like this that didn't cost them anything, and for me it was great to have. So play a little bit with the negotiator. I think you'll find it fun to play with it.
Yeah, so Joanna, let's talk about anonymizing the data. If you were to put in, thinking you were anonymizing data and saying, assume I'm negotiating with a prominent politician who recently had an assassination attempt on his life, and put in other details, and you think you're making it anonymous, but everybody knows who you're talking about. And I assume that in the business world, it's the same, where you think you could say, assume that I'm negotiating with a company and it's based in this part of the world and it has this kind of revenue and it makes this kind of product. You're not putting in the name of the company, but how can you make sure that you're not putting in so much telltale stuff that you're keeping it realistic, giving enough information to conduct a real negotiation, but not so much information that you lose the anonymization of it?
That's a tough one, Jeff, because and that's why, for example, at the bank, I'm not allowed to use it. And when it finally gets to the point that I can use it, which we're going into trial phase, it's going to have to be a closed system. So basically everything that I fit into it will go to the disappear. So in big companies, if you start using a solution like this, you have to make sure that is a closed circuit, in the sense that anything that it would fit to it, you would not go to it would just be erased, and that you're sure that will be erased. Now, if you're doing this just at home, like I've been doing it for other different negotiations, you have to be careful, right? And you kind of have to read it yourself and see, would be any way that I could recognize what situation this is. So maybe you could mislead it and say, I'm negotiating with this person. He was recently an attempt to assassinate him in Argentina, or try to mislead the situation in some way, but that you still get the answers that you need. It's like when you go to the pharmacy and say, I'm buying this for a friend, you kind of try to make the story. I'm asking for a friend.
Joanna,
but really, yeah.
I'm so sorry to say we're out of time, because we could go on with this and related topics for a very long time. And as Johnny Carson used to say to guests on the Tonight Show, will you come back and visit us again?
I would love to. And let me answer one last question for Tina before we close. She asked me, how can we expand on closed systems if it's your own large language model? Tina, it's too expensive to create your large language model, and it would not ever be as good. So basically, there's some sort of contracts that you make with, for example, Copilot, or with other of these large language models, that they would have somehow to make sure that your data doesn't leak out of your system in your company, and that then's integrated with your own software, and all your technical stuff has to make sure that it's done in a way that it works with the compliance. I'm unfortunately not really sure of the details, but I could find out. If you write me on LinkedIn, I will find the answer for how we did that, because I know the person that integrated it. Sorry,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Joanna, again, thank you so much. We're out of time. I wish we could continue, and I hope we continue again with you on another installment of the New Possibilities Hour. Thank you all for joining us. Please consider supporting the Tafel Germany Food Bank. The link is in the comments. If you're not able to make an international transfer, if you're not in Germany, please contribute to a food bank wherever you are. Food insecurity, sadly, is a worldwide problem and situation. Joanna, thank you so much. Joana Matos of Deutsche Bank for fascinating presentation. And with that, we are complete.